Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We start our discussion on data communications and network. This lecture is in continuation with the previous two lectures. In today's discussion, we will be discussing some of the important concepts related to networks. Earlier, we had discussed some concepts from data communication, and since data communication is one of the important reasons to form a computer network, so it was important to introduce you with some of the basic terminologies and concepts in data communication so that you can have better understanding with the concepts in network. With network, we here means computer network and how it is formed and how data is transmitted using computer networks. Let's begin with our discussion agenda and recap the topics we have already discussed so far. In previous lectures, we have discussed concepts related to data communication, as I just said. You all know what is data communication now. Data communication mainly refers to the exchange of data between 2 points. One point is the sender who generates and transmits data, while the other point is the receiver who receives the data. Then we discussed different elements that form or that make data communication possible. In previous lecture, we have seen different elements that ensure data communication. Mainly there are 3 elements, but in order to cover up the whole data communication process, we discussed a total of 5 elements for data communication. First important element is the sender. Now, who is the sender? It's a computer or any electronic device which can create the information or data and send, has this capability to transmit, is known as the sender. Second important element in data communication is the receiver. Now, who is the receiver? It is again a computer or any electronic device that has the capability to receive the data sent from the sender. Third important element is the media that carries the data or through which data can travel. It is known as communication media or communication channel. We discussed there are 2 types of communication media that can be wired with the help of some cables. You can ensure data communication, or the channel can be unwired, which can also be known as wireless communication, such as we use in case of Wi-Fi. Fourth important element is the data that we want to transmit. We also call it the message that we want to send between the sender and the receiver. Message simply refers to the data or the piece of information that is required to be communicated between 2 parties. And data or message can be in any form that include maybe a text file, an audio file, a video file, or even the live streams. The fifth important element to ensure data communication that we discussed was the protocols. Protocols are simply the set of rules that govern the data communication. Protocols ensure how data is to be written, how data is to be carried through some media, and how data is to be delivered to the receiver. So it performs various functions that we have already discussed in previous lectures. Then we discussed different types of data communication in previous lecture. Two common types are serial and parallel data communication that we discussed. Serial data transmission sends data bits by bit, one after another, over a single channel or a single communication media. While on the other hand, parallel data transmission requires sending multiple data bits at the same time over multiple channels. We discussed both of these techniques in detail with diagrams in previous lectures. The next topic that we discussed was what are the modes of data communication? What are different techniques by which data can be carried from one destination to another, or from one point to another? So we discussed different modes. The first mode, or the simplest one, is known as the simplex mode of data communication. In simplex mode, communication is generally unidirectional or in one direction. That means a sender will have to act as a sender always, and a receiver will always be a receiver. Data is transmitted just in one direction. Receiver does not have the capability to respond to the message it receives. Best example of simplex mode of communication is your television sets or your doorbells. Second mode of communication that we discussed was the duplex mode of communication. That means data can be communicated in two-way, or it is also known as a bidirectional way of data communication. It was further divided in two types. One was half duplex, in which the sender and receiver send and receive messages in both the directions, but only one at a time. That means a sender has to send message at a time, or it can receive message at a time. It cannot act or the two functions, sending and receiving, at the same time. The best example of this type of this mode of communication is the wireless sets that generally we use, such as walkie-talkies. Second type of duplex mode of communication was the full duplex that we discussed. And in this mode of data communication, both the stations, that means both the sender and receiver, can transmit and receive the data simultaneously. That means a sender not only can send but also can receive at the same time. Similarly, receiver can not only receive the data but also can send at the same time. The best example of this was your telephone lines that you use. You can not only listen but also can talk at the same time. Third mode of communication that we discussed was the asynchronous mode of communication, in which data is transmitted at irregular intervals. So we generally append the starting and ending bits with data so that the receiver can understand when a data bit is started and when it is stopped. The fifth mode of communication that we discussed was the synchronous mode of communication. That means here data can be transferred as continuous or consistent manner that are spaced timely. So, continuous stream of data or signals is sent, but before sending the data, sender first sends the synchronization bits to the receiver in order to ensure that receiver synchronizes its internal digital clock with the sender. So this is the fastest mode of data communication as compared to the asynchronous communication. So these were the topics that we discussed so far related to data communication, and these are important as they are required for the computer networks. The topic that we are going to discuss in today's discussion is, what is a network? We have discussed data communication, what is data communication and how data is communicated. And now it is important to form computer networks. So let's see, what is a computer network? What are the basic elements that form a computer network? And further related important concepts will be discussed in this and coming few lectures. So let's proceed with our today's discussion. What is a network? Let's develop our understanding with the term network. We mainly are referring to computer network. So how we can define a network? A network is a collection of computers by different communication links. Interconnection of different stations or different computers by some communication media is what is a network. So a network is a collection of computers, electronic devices and networking devices connected to one another to allow data communication. An example of network is the internet that connects millions of people all over the world. So network consists of multiple devices that communicate with one another. It can be as small as two computers, or can be as large as internet. So the capacity or size of network may vary. It can be as small as two computers or can be as large as an internet, where billions of devices are connected. While traditional network was comprised of just desktop computers, but the latest and modern networks include not only the desktop computers but also the tablets, your laptops, your televisions, your smartphones, your gaming consoles and different smart appliances. The use of computer networks mainly overcome the geographical barriers and distances between two parties to inform or to enable both the parties to communicate data or to share some information. Now, how data network or computer network is formed? Network mainly consists of some networking devices that use different types of protocols to specify how two points will communicate. We have already discussed protocols in detail in previous discussions. Now, what are the different uses of a computer network? Before that, since the definition says a network is formed using different communication links, that means the computer or any electronic device on a network are linked through either wired media, that is cables, telephone lines, or unwired media, that means wireless communication is possible between them. That includes through radio waves, satellite waves, or infrared waves. Now, what are different uses of forming a network, a computer network? So here are some of the uses. You can have more, but the basic uses that I have mentioned here are: why we require to form a computer network? Because we require to share some files. So file sharing is the first important reason or benefit of computer network, that enables the user to share data files through network. Data file can be any text file, any video file, any audio file. Another benefit of forming computer network is application sharing. That means a computer network allows user to share different software applications through the network. You generally send some softwares to your friends through some network. So applications are shared over computer networks. You may also use computer networks to share hardware. For example, you store your data on third-party storage. For example, your emails are stored on some third-party storage. That means you are using the hardware or storage of some other computer. So hardware sharing is also one of the reason or benefit of forming computer network. Important model for computer network is the client-server model, in which different computers are grouped together to form a client-server model. Server is a computer that provides different services to other computers, while clients are those computers that request those services. So best example is the Google. Google is a server that serves your needs, and we all ping Google or send requests to Google for specific data. So we all, or our computers are all clients. So computer network is helpful in forming client-server model, or computer network operates in client-server model, though there are other models as well, but this is the basic model that generally are being operated in different applications. Another benefit that we can observe by using computer network is the voice over IP. That means computer network allows the user to send voice data through some computer network by using protocols related to voice. So when you talk or send just voice messages to your friends, that means over some network, so it is actually a type of voice over internet protocol. So internet protocol is the protocol that is being used to ensure this facility. Another benefit or another reason to form computer network is the communication. You can have different sort of communication, such as video conferencing. You can have text communication. You can have just audio communication. So any sort of communication is now possible with the help of computer networks. And then you can have your business. So most of the businesses are now internet based or computer network based, which is known as electronic commerce or e-commerce, that enables the user to sell and buy different products over some computer network. And then you can have gaming on some network that enables different users to play together from various locations. So these are some of the benefits that we normally get if we develop a computer network. You can have many other benefits as well that come to your mind. So here we defined what is a network. Network basically is the interconnection of different computers through some communication media. The communication media may be wired or it may be unwired. And why we develop a computer network? So these are some of the reasons, such as file sharing, application sharing, hardware sharing, to create a model such as client server, to send your voice using some protocols, to send video communication, audio communication, data communication, text communication, to form your business on internet and to play games. So these are some reasons why we require to develop a computer network. Now, how computer network works. This is an important topic. We can form a computer network, but how it works, how we can make it capable to work. Computer network generally operates using a variety of software and hardware. So you cannot only use software to make a computer network workable. And you cannot only rely on any hardware or on any specific hardware alone to make a computer network workable. So it is actually the collaboration of different software and hardware to make a computer network workable. Data packets that we generally send over a network. What is a packet? We have already discussed it in modes of data communication, where we were discussing the synchronous mode as data were sent in groups, which we termed as packets. So data packets or packet switched networks, that means data that is being sent in groups over a network. So they use specific protocol which is known as TCP/IP. It is a protocol, transmission control protocol and internet protocol, in order to first develop a bridge between the sender and receiver. This was possible in case of synchronous mode of communication, where we developed a bridge between sender and receiver by sending synchronization bits. So this is the protocol TCP/IP that first creates the bridge between two parties, and after then packets are sent from sender to receiver. So this is how your computer network works. Every endpoint in a network has some unique identifier. Every node, a node is another computer, some hardwares, any electronic device is known as a node. So every node within the computer network has some unique identifier. This identifier is used to indicate the source and destination of data transmission. The identifiers, how we define an identifier. So identifier includes the node's IP address, or it may also include the MAC address of specific hardware on the network. MAC address is actually the media access control address. IP address of specific device keeps on changing on a network. Whenever you comes again and again on a network, you may get different IPs. But the MAC address or media access control address always would remain the same. That is hardwired in your device. The endpoint nodes that are used for routing purposes include the hardware such as switches and routers, your sensors, phones, etc. So every node may not be either the sender or receiver. Some of the nodes may act as data forwarding devices. So those data forwarding devices or hardware are maybe switches, routers, phones, sensors, etc. Then the OSI model. What is OSI model? OSI stands for Open System Interconnection Model. Defines the format, how data is to be transmitted between the sender and how it is to be received by the receiver. So this is the model that defines how network or computer network will operate. I'm not going in detail of OSI model here, as this is your just introduction to computing subjects. So we are not going to discuss different concepts in further depth. But how computer network works, it is required that it is only possible if you have different required software and hardware. It is not the task of a hardware alone or a software alone. So both the software and hardware work together to form a computer network. So what sort of softwares are required? Such as the protocols. Protocols are in shape of softwares. These are the rules such as TCP, IP, OSI model. So these are some of the rules or software in shape, you can say, that are required to make the computer network workable. And what hardwares are required? Not every node is the sender or receiver node. Some nodes or some hardware are those hardware that forward your messages, such as different switches, routers, etc. So both the software and hardware are required to make the computer networks workable. Now, what are the elements of computer network? Objects basically used computer networks are known as computer elements. Those objects that use the computer networks are known as computer elements. So there are a total of 4 networking elements. The first one is the terminal, or simply computers. What is a computer? It is an electronic or digital device that is capable to accept data as input, processes that data, and generates some output. That means raw data has been transformed to information for decision making. Network is, or computer network is formed by computers for the purpose of data communication or data exchange. So generally between 2 computers data is communicated. So this is the first basic element. Second element is the transmission media. That means through which we can send data from one point to another. Signals are used to represent data by computers and other telecommunication devices. Generally, data is converted in shape of signals. These signals, which are actually the data, are sent in form of electromagnetic waves, that means energy, from one point to another. So these signals travel through either air, vacuum, or some cable to reach to the other point. Now, transmission media, as we have already discussed in previous discussion, are of two types. They can be wired media, or we also call them guided media. They are generally in form of cables such as twisted pair cables or optical fiber cables. Or the transmission media can be wireless, or we also call them unguided media, such as the data sent through signals in shape of radio waves, infrared waves, and microwaves. For example, you use Wi-Fi, so it is actually the unguided media that you are using to send your data. Another third important element is the protocol. Now, what is protocol? We have already defined what is a protocol in previous discussions. These are the rules for communication between different networking devices. How different devices need to communicate? So the rules are predefined for them. Those set of rules are known as protocols. So protocol includes the mechanism for devices to identify and develop connections with one another, and also how they can form packets out of data that are required to be sent. We have already discussed different functions that are performed by protocols, such as they ensure data flow, they correct the message, that means if there is some error in the message, they inform the sender that data has some error, so error rectification is one of the functions of protocol. So in short, protocol are the rules that ensure how data communication is to be made possible. That ranges from developing the communication channel between two parties, also to sending and receiving and the format of data that is being communicated between the two parties. So without protocol, it is not possible for the two media, for the two computers, even if they have any communication media between them, but there are no protocols being followed by any of the computer or one of the computers, still the data communication will not be possible. The fourth important element are the networking softwares. Networking software is mainly the foundation for any network. It helps the network administrators to develop, manage, and monitor some computer network. Earlier, the computer networks were made up of some specialized hardware such as switches and routers that have the networking software embedded in them. So this software encompasses a lot of softwares for the designing, implementation, and monitoring of the computer networks. So traditional computer networks were mainly hardware that were based on some software, as software were embedded in those hardware. But the more technology got developed, so we now have software-defined networks. That means now software are considered as separate from the hardware. So that makes those hardware more adaptable to the changing nature of computer networks. Now you do not need to change hardware whenever you need to bring some change in your computer network. So now hardware is separate and softwares work separately. So these are the 4 basic elements that are required to form some computer network. Networks are of 2 types. Either networks can be public network or a network can be a private network. So what is the difference between the 2 types of networks? Public networks generally are offered by some publicly accessible area. Public networks are offered by the businesses or areas that are accessible by the public, since they are a convenient way to get connected to the internet. Some public networks or Wi-Fi networks require password before connection, while some may not require password, and any compatible device can easily connect to it whenever it comes within its range. But the threat associated with the public networks are that they are less secure as compared to your home networks. Private data need not to be or should not to be sent over public networks. Generally, it is advised if a public network does not require any password, so better not to connect to that network or send your sensitive data or public network. It is generally not advised. While on the other hand, the private networks are those networks on which no other device without having permission can get connected. So they have their specific privacy measures in order to prevent the unauthorized or unwanted connections. So no electronic device can easily connect to some private network. They have tight security rules. Private networks are mainly used for schools, for homes. The network you have in your home is the private network, or the mobile hotspots that you generally make for the security and to preserve the bandwidth. So private networks are generally used within some defined area. It cannot be accessed outside of that area, or any device outside of that area cannot get connected to a private network. That is why a private network is more secure as compared to the public network. That is all we discussed today, or we started today our discussion on network. We define what is a network. A network is a collection of different computers and networking devices that are interconnected to one another through some communication media. The communication media can be wired media with the help of some cables, or that can be unwired media using some waves in form of waves or signals such as Wi-Fi. We defined different reasons why we need to develop computer networks. So we defined different benefits of computer networks, different uses of computer networks, or different reasons why we need to establish computer networks. Then we discussed how computer network operates. So in order to work a computer network possible, it is required to have different required softwares and hardware all in place. It is not a task of mere some software or mere some hardware. Different protocols in shape of softwares are required to be there in order to make data communication possible. And different hardware that may be computers which act as sender and receiver, and they may not be either sender or receiver. Instead, they are some routing devices or data forwarding devices such as switches and routers need to be there to ensure computer network workable. Then we discussed different elements that form a computer network. 4 different elements were discussed. We have computers as senders and computers as receivers. Then there must be some communication media, either wired media or unwired media. And then there must be some protocols that ensure how data is to be communicated between the sender and receiver. Then there must be having some networking software that ensures how those hardware are going to work to ensure data communication. So these were 4 basic or common elements that form a computer network. Then we discussed different types of computer networks. Some are public networks that are accessible publicly at public places being offered by some businesses, and some are private networks that are generally formed within some location having tight security measures. So no other device outside of that location without any specific permission can access a private network. So private network is more secure as compared to public network. So that is all for now. We will continue our discussion on computer networks in the coming lecture. I hope the things that we discussed today must be clear to you. Still, if there is any confusion, you can ask me on KCMS or email me your queries. My email address is written here. I thank you all for now.